Hi, my name is Alan Richardson and welcome to the EvilTester show. Now I receive a lot of concerned emails and messages from people who are concerned that their testing skills are not going to be enough to keep them in work and that the future revolves around automation, in which they don't know how to do. They got no programming experience. Should they learn how to do the API or the user interface? What programming language should they learn? And people do feel that their careers are at risk. So I'm going to spend the next few podcasts on these type of topics. Automating without code, incorporating more technology-based approaches into your testing, tactical versus strategic automating, commercial tools versus open source, and how to recruit testers effectively. You can find the show notes and previous shows at eviltester.com/show, but first we'll start with the general concern about automating. It's a question I get asked a lot. I mean, a lot. I get emails about this, messages on LinkedIn, messages over Twitter, messages on Instagram. People want to know, how can we get into automated execution, right? And what people ask me is, my career is on the line. Everyone wants test automation. Everyone wants testers who can automate. I can't automate. I can't program. I don't know what to do. How can I get started? Now, I've created a couple of blog posts on this in the past, so I'll link to those. But this notion of we have to automate or we die. I did a web search on Google. Lots of images came back. Images that I've used in my talks from a book called Automation, which was by Carl Dreyer. Very small book from, I think, the 50s, looking at how automation will change people's lives, things like that. Now, I think it's a slightly disturbing trend that people view automating as so tied up with testing, right? Because I don't even use the term test automation, except for marketing, right? I use test automation for marketing because that's the term that people understand. I think things would be much clearer if we don't say test automation, instead talk about automating things, because we can automate things for the purpose of doing something efficiently, for the purpose of releasing it quickly, for the purpose of doing repeated tasks over and over again, independently of testing, right? Automatability has nothing to do with testing except when we view it through a testing lens and go, in order to have a strategy for testing that incorporates automating, we need this thing to be automatable to support that work. But you need things to be automatable simply to automate them, not necessarily for testing and test automation. And the reason I think it's slightly disturbing for testing is that testing is a massive set of skills and knowledge to look into. Now you can look into it because it will spread out into psychology, psychotherapy, sociology, statistics, test data generation, whole massive amounts of subjects that can be incorporated in, because it's not really a defined body of work, because it expands out into a whole bunch of things. We do have a lot of experience related to testing that we have to study, and we have to keep bringing in new items from other disciplines that will continue to grow, because testing is how we interact with the process for the purposes of finding out information, problems, risks, communicating those, massive amounts of stuff. And it's not a very small area, so you can be studying this for a long time. So to then turn around and say, in addition to doing that, what we also want you to do is learn how to code so that you can automate these applications. And one of the issues there is, in order to automate well, reliably, you have to code well. I mean, well. If you're using a code-based automated execution solution, you need to code well, understand abstraction layers, understand how to build up classes of objects really that are not tightly coupled, that allow you to change And it's slightly different set of guidelines than you do when you're coding. So it requires the same levels of experience that you want from a professional coder, because this is production code. It's code that you're using prior to putting something into production. That you're going to rely on it. It must be good. Now, one of the interesting things for me personally is I started programming before I started testing. I like programming. I've been doing programming for 20 plus years. It's part of how I work. It's part of how I interact with things. I think it's beneficial for people to learn how to program because their understanding of the applications that we use changes and becomes deeper, and they will test in a more technical way. But to have people forced into learning that is a bad thing. So I think it's a good thing if you do it and enjoy it and take value from it, because I think it will expand your options. I think it's bad if you're doing it because you're forced into it, because you won't enjoy it, you won't approach it in the right way, and it may not be something that you have a natural affinity for. Therefore, it may be harder for you to learn. And then that can be hard because you've got the pressure of, I really need to do this, otherwise I won't get a job. And then you see people who have a more natural affinity to it, or people who have more experience that relates into that, who are proceeding faster. And you think, I'll never be able to do this because these people are learning this in 5 seconds and it's taking me hours to learn this. And there's a lot of barriers in place. So just as a general industry thing, it's not necessarily the best of moves. However, coding is not the only way to automate. Right now, in the past, I've changed my opinions on this. I used to think that in order to really automate well, you needed to pick up a code-based solution and write code for that. Now I'm taking the view that there are now so many tools. It's about finding the most appropriate tool for the environment that you're in. So if you're working in an environment where the testers are expected to automate the application as part of their strategy, and they're expected to do that without any training or without giving the time to learn how to do this properly, or without any support from people that can code, look for a more code-free solution, because that's the environment that you're working in. And the people that are going to come after you are also going to be in that situation. So a code-free type solution is probably better for that environment. May not be better for your career going forwards, right? But we have to distinguish between our career going forwards and the environment that we're working in, with the aims that we're trying to achieve, with the test strategies that we have. But if you're in the situation where I really want to learn a code because that's the only way forward, if you don't have any experience of automating in the real world, it's going to be hard to get a job automating in the real world, because people are going to want that experience. So as you learn, make your learning public. And this is hard because you're going to be putting stuff on GitHub that you don't think is very good. You're going to write blog reports of what you're learning. It's going to feel basic. It's going to feel like you're just explaining what other people have already explained to you. And that's partly true, but you're demonstrating your understanding, and you're demonstrating you're working towards something. And that is, without experience, one of the only things you can do to convince people that you are trying to do this. But start where you are. Right? A lot of people will try and learn how to automate, and they will be working in a C# environment, and they'll be testing desktop apps, and they'll go, I need to learn Selenium WebDriver and Java, right? Different languages than they're working in, different technology than they're actually testing hands-on. Therefore, they can't use their current working environment to gain experience. Because if you learn tactically, if you learn how to automate tiny little parts of your work, if you find tools that you can script, you can use it in your work as tactics. It will add benefit to what you're doing. It contributes to the actual work that you are engaged in. So it doesn't seem like too much of an extra. And you don't have to think, what will I automate? Because it's going to be obvious, because it's part of your work. Start where you are. If you're testing APIs, learn how to automate APIs. If you're testing web apps, learn Selenium WebDriver and automate the web apps. If you're testing desktop apps, then you might want to look at Win App Driver or the Mac robot tools. But the desktop stuff is harder than the web and API. So maybe you want to look instead in terms of test data generation or controlling your environment or whatever it is you have to do. Look at the tasks that you're involved in and identify things that can be automated. Start tactically rather than strategically. Find a way to automate just something that you do. It doesn't have to be robust. It doesn't have to be completely reliable because you're probably going to be there as it works. It doesn't have to be particularly well written. It just has to function. It doesn't even have to be fully automated, right? Perhaps you get the application into a certain state, you run your script, then you take over for a while. It doesn't have to do everything. It's a tactic. It's a way of getting used to it. It's some aims that you're trying to achieve so that they can support you in what you do. Then you get the question, well, what language do I learn? And that depends on what you want to do. Are there libraries in that language that will support you? Who do you want to learn from, right? Because you're going to want someone that has some sort of program that can take you through it, and you have to relate to that person or the way that that person teaches you. Or just find people on YouTube that you can watch, that you can listen to, that explain things in a way that are useful to you. It's going to depend on the teacher. But primarily, most important, it's going to depend on who you have supporting you. Because where possible, do this within your current environment with your current work. Spend some time with the programmers that you work with, using the language that they're using to try and automate the tasks and activities that you have. That way you have a body of knowledge and experience to draw upon. Now, very often I find that people don't want to go up to the programmers they're working with and say, I'm trying to learn this language. Can you help me? Give me some guidance. Can we sit down and pair at lunchtime for half an hour just to show me some stuff? Can I pair on some of the code that you're writing so I get to see how you do it in the real world and get a feel for this code? A lot of people don't like doing that because they don't like showing a weakness, but you're not, right? You're showing strength. And what I have found is that if you are working with programmers, they like programming. They like talking about programming. They like seeing other people trying to learn how to get better and adopt the programming language that they're using. They are helpful. If you are making steps forward, they will help you. Now, obviously, you can't take up their entire time or expect them to teach you totally. They expect you to put the work in, go away, do some stuff, come back more knowledgeable having practiced. And if you do that, they will support you. Pretty much guaranteed. But if you don't have the advantage that you're at work, that it's supportive, that there are people who will help, then you're pretty much going to have to find some teachers online who have books or courses or YouTube videos or whatever it is that you can work through, and in parallel, immerse yourself in that language, right? So sign up for every blog that you can find on that programming language. Find every person on Twitter that uses that programming language. Look through GitHub for every project that uses that language and read the code. Right? Reading code is such an undervalued way of learning a language. But it is the way that most of us learned 30 years ago. You pick up a computer magazine 20, 30 years ago, it's filled with code, filled with listings, filled with code for languages you're never going to see. You're exposed to lots of different languages. You learn the different techniques and see how they relate to each other. You're reading code slightly out of context, so it's focused on snippets, which is why immerse yourself. If you don't have a O'Reilly Safari subscription, get a trial of that and then immerse yourself in every book that is available on that language, right? You're just going to have to, it is work, right? Just plow in, learn and read as much as possible and experiment as much as you can. Now, the hardest thing about learning code and learning to automate through code is that getting started is the hardest part. Scripting languages seem easy because of that, because you just install the scripting language and it's there, and people start writing code and they feel like they're making a lot of progress. Very often what they're doing is learning how to write bad code, because at some point you're going to move from automating tactically to automating strategically. And if you do that in code, you need to learn how to code well. So you need to learn the language well. But it doesn't really matter when you're starting, right? Just hack something out that actually works. Now, if it's for career growth, you're going to have to demonstrate that experience through blogs. But don't feel that you have to do this. One of the things that I've noticed is I've been pushing my skill set to be more and more technical. Remember, I started as a programmer, then I moved into testing, then I become more technical with testing, which doesn't mean I learned how to program better, although I did. It means I also learned the technologies that I was working with. One of the interesting things for that is that some related areas, like security testing, are much more in line with what we do as testers than programming and automating. The same thought processes, the same thinking through risks, trying to exploit risks. That's what security testers do. Now, it's a body of knowledge that you have to be interested in and have to study and work at. But that might be an alternative avenue for working through. It might not need to be programming. If it's for making a difference in your work, then look for tools that don't require as much scripting. Now, they're probably going to be commercial. There are keyword-driven tools that are open source, but many of the commercial tools support script list type automating. And that is a absolutely viable approach in an environment where the context is not programming and not teaching people how to code, but wanting to get something done and automating done. So you do have options. Don't stress about it, right? Because there will always be roles for people who are good at testing, regardless of whether they can code or not. But you have to be good at testing. So whatever path you take, put the work in, get good at it. It is possible to do this on your own. Just find the right avenue. I think it is not the best of ways of expanding our industry, but it's where we currently are. So start working on it tactically and make things happen. You can subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or in your favorite podcast tool. Just search for The EvilTester Show. All links that you need to subscribe and the show notes and the episode archives are at eviltester.com/show. And if you found this useful, please give it a thumbs up or a star or whatever you have to do to like it on that particular platform, and tell other people so that they can benefit from this as well. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Alan Richardson and you can find me at eviltester.com.